Welcome, everyone. We've conquered all of our sound gremlins today, I hope. I really appreciate having you guys here. It's been a very busy MDI season, we know, and so having you join us for this call is fantastic. I just want to start off by welcoming everyone. On our end here, we have Kim Schonert-Reichl. I'm Michael Brigham. We've got Anna Marie Bueno and Merritt Gilbert, and even Lisa Pedrini, our MDI National Coordinator, is here joining us today. And we have Mike Hooker from Revelstoke joining us on the phone. And on your end, it looks like we've got a wide geographic range. We've got a couple of people from our MDI National program who have registered today from Nova Scotia and from Ontario. And I just want to send you guys a really big welcome and thank you for joining us at what is probably a strange hour for you guys. But we're really grateful to have you here. So I'm just going to start off by introducing our special guest today. We have Kim Schonert-Reichl, who many of you probably know. She's our director here at HELP and is one of the leading figures in child development and created the MDI. We're also joined by Mike Hooker, who is superintendent of Revelstoke in School District 19 in Eastern British Columbia. Mike has been working with the MDI for many years as an incredible champion, and we've actually just completed his champion profile on the Discover MDI website. If you want to check that out, you can learn a little bit more about the work that he's been doing in Revelstoke and some of the questions that he answered when we set him up for the profile. So if you don't know these people, you're going to get a chance to know them a little bit better today through our conversation. I just wanted to share the topics that we hope to cover today. We want to share a little bit about how Mike has engaged teachers in his district and get Mike and Kim to talk a little about why that's so important. Then we're going to talk about what Mike calls MDI artifacts. These are some samples of work that he shared using the MDI in his district and the stories that go along with them. And finally, we'd like to wrap it up by sharing a little bit about some very unique work that Mike has piloted in Revelstoke, where students are actually leading the conversation about the MDI. Kim and I had the opportunity to witness some of this work last year, and it's grown even since then. So I'm really excited to get to these topics. But before we do, there is a little bit of housekeeping. So I just wanted to start off by throwing the mic over to Merritt so that she can give you an update on how the MDI is going.
Okay, hello everyone. Well, as most of you know, we have been in the field now for just over a month with the MDI, and there's just short of 2 weeks left to go. And this is our biggest MDI year ever, so we have been busy, but we're actually quite happy to report the volume is picking up. We know that many of you, or many districts have started late, especially in British Columbia due to the FSAs. And now we also hear that there's report cards. So I just want to really send a big thank you to everyone for their efforts and for actually making the MDI happen. We will probably send another update email and next week for the last push, so that you also get the best data possible. The other thing I just want to mention is that we would love feedback, really to hear from the teachers and administrators who have administered the survey. So I will also include a link a little later in the week that I hope that you can pass on to your teachers as well as your principals. And yeah, hopefully we can get some feedback from them. We love to hear from everyone. This is really how we can improve our MDI administration. And the feedback is anonymous, and we just really appreciate hearing from all of you. So I think that's my very brief update. Yeah.
Thanks, Brian.
Keep it up. Thank you.
Brian actually has to go man the phone lines because districts are still completing the MDI. So thanks, Brian. Really appreciate it. Just a couple of other housekeeping items. In February, our webinar is going to be a deep dive into one research topic, and we'd really like your input in shaping what that topic is. So we have a very quick survey that we're hoping that you can fill out. It's found on our trainer network page on Discover MDI. I'll be sharing that link in just a moment. But we just want to get a sense of what type of questions you're getting out in the field about certain dimensions or measures of the MDI, or pieces of research that you think would help your work and your practice. And we'll be taking the month of February to compile some MDI data as well as a literature review and other new research coming out on these topics. And your input is really important in that. Number 4 on this list, just wanted to call your attention to the Discover MDI website, where we have a couple of updates that that may be new to you. We have recently created a resources page. It's called Tools for Making Change. And we've combined all of our videos and our downloadable tools there, as well as some graphics that you can use in newsletters or on your social media that convey key points of the MDI. We also released a November Field Notes update. That's a new monthly digest. Kim has a piece in there about the importance of children's voices and marking the anniversary of the Declaration of the Rights of the Child. We have a new video that's featured on the Trainer Network page that was created in partnership with our Aboriginal Steering Committee. It's called Learning by Listening. So there's a bunch of stuff there. Please take a look. We'll be sharing those, on the Trainer Network page on a regular basis, but please feel free to go to the website and browse. And the last thing is just to remind you about some of the webinars that we'll be doing in 2018. We really, really hope that you can join. Just to give you like a little bit of a sneak peek, in January, we're going to be exploring school data and talking about how to build school plans. So we have a couple of guests on that webinar. Peter Dubinsky from Burnaby and Janelle Zebedee and Trisha from Okanagan are going to be joining us to talk about how they make this happen and really give us a concrete sense of what it means to do work at the school. In February, we're going to be doing on Valentine's Day, that research deep dive that I mentioned. And in April, we're actually going to be walking everyone through some new tools we're creating about an inquiry process around the MDI. So please feel free to put these in your calendars. We'd love to have you join us in the new year. All right, now that is it for updates. Let's get this started. Before we go, just take a look at these links here. The Trainer Network, discovermdi.ca/trainer network, and discovermdi.ca/resources, where you'll find some of those new things and feedback surveys I just mentioned. All right, excellent. So now we're going to turn this over to Mike and Kim. I thought that we could start by talking about teachers. By the way, if anyone has questions, just want to point out how you can ask questions. You can either enter them in the chat box and we'll take them, or you can raise your hand so that we know to call on you. I think we'll try and save the questions for the end, but please throw them in the chat box or write it down on a piece of paper and raise your hand when the time is ready. Thank you also to anyone who submitted questions in advance. We have a list of those here, and if we have time, we'll get to those. If we don't have time today, we'll definitely be answering those questions on the website. All right, so let's talk about engaging teachers. Mike, we shared an email that you sent around where you actually invited teachers in your district to make space for you to come in and talk directly to them and their classes about the MDI. So, we have a couple of questions. We find that teachers are probably maybe the best place to enact some of this change because they have regular contact with the students, and yet they aren't always plugged into the MDI. And they don't always see the reports. So we're hoping that you can share a little bit about the work you've done in your district, and you and Kim can talk about why that's so important. So the questions that came to mind here is just trying to understand where teachers are coming from, where people in the district are coming from, and how we can make that conversation flow smoothly. Talk a little bit about some of the key messages that we want to impart, and then share a little bit about just what this conversation actually looks like on the ground. So Mike, do you want to take it away?
Sure, with just a very, very quick overview of the invitation and then getting into classrooms. And Michael, you referred to it at the beginning, that some of the work that you and Kim saw firsthand when we brought students together. The invitation to begin with, and I just need to check now, Michael, because my audio feels funny. Is the audio fine?
Hi, Mike. We actually can't hear you through the phone, but we're hearing you through the go-to.
Okay, and it's good?
If you're still on the line, it would be.
Yeah. So sorry about that. So there's the line, there's the phone line. Is that better?
That's great, Mike. Thank you.
Okay, excellent. Sorry about that. Yeah, so just quickly, just back up then, starting with some of the work, Michael, that you and Kim saw early on when you were here last year. That began with we're doing in their classrooms with MDI. Rather than come in as an MDI presentation, it was more about going in with backup to support the work that was already taking place. And so, and I think you refer quite regularly to finding champions, and that's been really key to our success, was to identify some school champions, and then go look for those people to become engaged, and whether they were involved in self-regulation projects, professional development along that line, or interested in school climate improvement or social emotional learning, like really intentionally finding those teachers to begin with. So the invitation goes out very broadly, but then the shoulder tapping takes place after that to say, hey, would you be interested? And then come in, and very firstly, getting started with connecting, using the MDI just to support the work that's already taking place. And that sounds like connecting language in classrooms, for example, to say, we know, I know you've been working on a whole variety of things around healthy eating or healthy habits. And so here are some pieces of the MDI that really connect with that. And then on that backdrop, using the MDI grade 4 data or grade 7 data doesn't much matter. We've been very careful and intentional in saying that this is a representative sample of all of our students, rather than saying this data belongs to grade 4s or belongs to grade 7. And so that promotes the conversations that we wanted to take place. I guess the other piece to that that's been important is finding different ways to engage students, and there's a few slides I think maybe coming up, Michael, about the way that you can engage, because I think any manner of conversation is what we want. And while we've done a few very specific projects and sort of worked along that line, anything where the students are able to start reflecting on what they know about health and well-being is the opening to that conversation.
Yeah, so Mike, thanks so much, and just thank you so much for joining us today. And I think this is fantastic to look at how it goes on the ground. I think we need to just have Mike mute. Is that right? Okay. Sorry, this is a lot of technology coordination, as you can imagine, to do this kind of talk show format. But really, I think that you bring up such a good point of going and talking to teachers to show them how what is collected on the MDI lines with things they're already doing and initiatives. And that's one thing I've always, I love that you do that there, but I'm not sure how often it happens that teachers who are administering the MDI actually know about the beautiful reports that come back to the schools and the school districts. So I think one thing I would love to do, is think about people going and showing teachers the reports before they even do the MDI, to say, here's what the information you get back. Oh, I know what are some things that you think would be really important to learn about your students and things. So I think I really would love to see and hear more about opportunities where teachers get that information before they even do the MDI, so they could be thinking about it.
Taking off on that point, I think that was a critical piece to getting some ownership of the MDI data, and a couple of really important parts that came along with that, related to making sure that the data was in no way a judgment of what was taking place in a classroom or a school, and because our teachers take great ownership, and particularly when it comes to the social emotional wellness of their students. And so originally feeling like if an area, for example, of vulnerability was higher, or the at-risk was higher than what they'd expected, having that personal feeling of some defensiveness. And that's where it was really important to come in with data that was community, like we used the community reports rather than the actual school level data, and being really intentional about the conversation, starting as, this is what it says about our students. And I had a grade 7 student ask this year, does it change from year to year? And it was a great question. And it spoke to that comparison purpose, the comparison is such a natural thing we want to do. And the response to that really is, first off, is another question. Do you think it should change, or do you think it would change from cohort to cohort, or from different group to different group? And if it did, what would it say? And so just answering every question with more questions so that you continue to deep dive into the data.
Fantastic. And I love your idea too about this idea. This is about your kids, but remember, they live in a context, and the MDI doesn't just gather information about their lives in school. It's about their lives at home and in the neighborhood, and the importance of taking this whole child approach, but also the multiple contexts in which children live. So the idea is it's not just one person's responsibility to make sure these kids are doing well. To use the phrase, it takes a village. And I think MDI is about bringing that information about the village to the people who can make the difference in their lives, the children's lives.
It was, and in addition, anytime a community is able to bring in other partners, so whether it's the youth liaison or the in our case in Revelstoke, it's community connections, youth counselors. We have all different manners and names for them across the province and Canada, but it's the outside people coming in and actually exploring the data with you. And so, and the natural spot, the nicest jump off point we found for that is the slides around connections to adults in the school and in the community and at home. And for the most part, providing that data is relatively, it doesn't look like a weak spot to start. If it's a relative strength in your area, then it has created outstanding conversation for us, because that immediately has students start to talk about what it is that makes an adult important. And you've got an excellent piece in MDI data that says what makes an adult important to you. And that's a really enriching conversation with students when they start saying, what is it about an adult that has you feeling connected to them? It's a great starting point.
So Mike, I have a question. If I was a new teacher in your district, I wasn't really familiar with the MDI, or maybe we'd gone through it for a year, but I wasn't quite sold on it yet. Could you just sort of walk me through what that first conversation would look like when you came to my classroom and wanted to share more about why Revelstoke was doing the MDI?
Yeah, and I think that's important to have those artifacts, and some of them that I've shared, and I think we need to share them more broadly, because I know other districts have done some fabulous work that way, really just tying in those very easy to understand overarching slides that really that open that conversation. And I guess the other piece to that is bringing along someone else with me, and that's the important part about having teacher support and having those local champions that saw the value, that saw the engagement of their students, and knew that it was coming in without a judgment. There was some past criticisms of things like our learning, now called the student learning survey, but satisfaction surveys, that really felt like they were being used as a little bit of a judgment of schools and of individual classrooms. And so building that culture around it, that it's a culture of caring and understanding, and it starts with conversation. So we don't really get to the data immediately. You get to those big overarching general ideas, and then you have to have the trust built first before you can actually be really digging into what the data actually means. And for a brand new teacher, that starts with an opportunity. And we haven't done it now for 2 years because we haven't had to, but we did bring teachers in, and we committed the time and the resources to have teachers released from their classrooms to come together around a set agenda to explore health and well-being. And a good way to do that for us was to combine the MDI and the heart and mind resources, and then to build giving projects out of that. So MDI was embedded in the afternoon. My intent was clearly to get MDI information out, but because we used it in with heart and mind resources and led towards a giving project, it had multi levels for people to engage into, and so staff didn't need to feel that they were fully either engaged or not engaged into the MDI, because everyone had an entry point, and that was really critical to our long-term success, I think.
Great, thank you, Mike.
That's amazing. Great, thank you.
We just wanted to share a couple of slides that we pulled together that are some of the key messages that you may want to impart to teachers or anyone new to the MDI. I think many people on this call are already well versed in it, but just wanted to highlight that these are available again on the Discover MDI website. So if you don't quite feel comfortable sharing the message, or you want to use our words, that they are here for you. So I'm just going to go ahead and show you those briefly, and then move on to some of those MDI artifacts that Mike was talking about. So here we've got the MDI dimensions. We've actually started to display this in a circle now. We had kind of a crazy flow chart before, but I think this is a little easier for people to understand. But really it's really important to highlight to people that this isn't just a single measure. It's not just an academic measure, as Kim said earlier, that it really is looking at the child in the context of their whole lives.
And I was just because I've had several people asking me different questions, I was just going to add, one of the responses I say, for example, people say, we don't want to take time out of the school day. We have to get through the curriculum. We have to, this is taking time away from their studies. Well, there's two things I respond. First of all, I say, you know what? The recent science says that these things, like the social emotional development, are better predictors of school success than grades or other indices. They really are. These are the things that we know predict how well you'll do in life. So it isn't taking time away. It's giving us important information. The other thing is that we really, again, with the argument about taking time away from studies, the MDI provides so much more comprehensive information than any other assessment tool out there, including the FSAs. So here, the MDI, which takes a shorter time, actually aligns not only with the core competencies, especially the personal and social competency. This information is comprehensive about children's lives in school and out of school. So again, it makes the argument that I believe that the MDI is integral and should be part of the curriculum, is not taking time away, because even just having students complete the assessments are helping develop their self-awareness and their social awareness and their connectedness.
So just a couple of other key messages. You can find this again on Discover MDI. We have a document called 5 Key Messages of the MDI. We won't spend too much time on them here, but it is helpful to be able to reiterate these with audiences that are new to the MDI. So reminding them that it's a population level tool, that we're not using this to get information about individual students, and we're not reporting on individual students. And sometimes parents and educators alike can get stuck on that question, that this really is looking at whole populations of kids over time and across geographies. We always want to emphasize that it's strength-based, that we're asking kids about what's good in their lives, we're asking them about their daily habits, and that this isn't an opportunity to pinpoint what's wrong, but rather talk about what's already working and then how we can build on that. That these things are things we can actually change. We know that if we teach kids the social emotional skills that they need to develop, that can improve outcomes, and that if we focus on the assets that support them in the community, we can do the same. Our constant mantra of saying that children's voices matter, and I think we'll get to see a really good example of this in a couple of minutes when Mike talks about the work that he's done with youth. And so let's go right there. Mike, you used the term artifacts when we've talked before about this. I just want to sort of give the reins to you here, because I have a couple of different examples you provided, and let you share a little bit about how it came about and what you're doing with this content. So give me just a second.
Sure. Okay, I love the Harrison Ford.
All right, Mike, go ahead.
Okay, good. Yeah, so I think if we're going to go through a couple of them, I guess first off, just a note about the importance. I felt like the importance of using the actual slides from the graphics right from the MDI reports. And not only has it saved us time in terms of being able to very quickly pull together data for different sources, including some access to other funding sources and those sort of things, but creates a consistency throughout the district, so that these are the kind of slides that we're using in presentation slides with students when our elementary students and our secondary students are seeing them, and then they show up here in this particular one in school growth plans. I know lots of other districts have been doing a similar thing with using the data right in. What I want to just point out with this one was trying to tie it in with other sources of data as well, to say that the middle years development instrument, while I believe it's actually much more comprehensive than anything else we've got, there are other entry points for conversation, and so some of those included in still tracking things like the learning surveys. So the school plans, and they're evolving into inquiry plans now, but this was last year's school plans, and each of our schools use it this way. And I think that perhaps the next slide that you had was moving on to the annual school reports, and this is indicative now of how our principal's approach to this is a principal produced report. Each of our schools naturally now integrate pieces of the MDI because they're using it in their school plans. It shows up in their annual school reports. And then these are excellent, and I guess they're artifacts, but they're the sharing of with the community about how the school's going, and the annual report back to boards. I think the next slide that you had, if it's this was just an effort to be always having in front of our staff and every opportunity to be reminding them about what we felt like was important. And this was a slide from our PowerPoint at the start of the year when we had everybody from, including, and I know lots of districts do this really well, having custodians, maintenance people, through to all of our teaching staff, and community partners into a venue to start off the school year, or at various venues. And this was just a reminder that, you know, we do track this. It's another opportunity to really to say what a great job we're doing in terms of connecting with youth, and not surprisingly in the community. They're supporting as well. And the reference here to the can you name two people in this setting, this was the beginning of our tying it in with Linda Kaiser and Judy Halbert's work around inquiry, which has become really important to us. That fits nicely. And so we're integrating it in with work that on the education side, some of our, you know, our teachers are obviously interested in engaging in. I think if you've got one more slide there, then this was the, we're going, sorry, I'm just slightly out of order. The data supported grants. This has been really helpful for us, and this was the daily breakfast program this year. We've used the MDI data in the past to support our applications for, in this case, farm to school and breakfast programs. We've also used it in our application to Well Ahead. Many people would be aware of the Well Ahead projects taking place across the province, and so just looking for opportunities to again highlight the data that we're collecting, because as Kim pointed out, there's so much rich data in there. I don't think a lot of people are even aware of the level of information that's available to us. And then Michael, maybe the last slide you've got is looking for opportunities to share in the community, and this is just an excerpt from a newspaper article. Anytime I have an opportunity to share in the newspaper or the media or radio, I always find a way to build in, because our number one goal being health and well-being, bringing back again some measure of something from the MDI. I think this was 2 years ago. This was actually last year. I think this one was published, and just reinforcing and reconnecting with MDI, but with that big umbrella focus of health and well-being.
Mike, could you just tell us how you pitch the local paper? You know, not every news outlet might even know what to do with the MDI data, so it'd be interesting if you could just talk about how that's framed.
Yeah, I think lots of communities are likely able to do this. I'll tell you, our newspaper actually approached us routinely. I mean, it's a pretty good community newspaper, but I don't think it has to be a full-on community newspaper. I think it's preparing and pitching a story that relates to health and well-being, and there was more to this. But I think because the news wants to is prone to grabbing hold of bad news stories and issues, and so this actually was connected in our conversation with the newspaper to dealing with issues around bullying, and when it's in the news, bullying and harassment or mental health and anxiety, and new stats coming out on high levels of diagnosable anxiety around children, turning the conversation into, I can provide some information to say, here are the positive things that are taking place in the schools. So that's really been key to us to provide the information. Is like that's not, you know, you can see in that particular one, I'm writing the story and they're agreeing to publish it. I'm not sure how many local papers. I think most local papers actually are interested in doing it. We do all the work, so they have nothing to lose except for a little bit of space in their paper.
I have one question. It doesn't, I mean, I just remember sometimes board meetings, there's often a reporter there from the community, and that might be an opportunity to connect with that. I mean, I think that's, anyway, so I love that you have that idea of sharing in the community and highlighting the positive and not just the negative. But is that true? Do a lot of board meetings have a reporter from the community paper or something?
Yeah, I think ours certainly does, and actually, this reporter from this paper, I think probably we're in most districts would have more news reporting than what we would have. We have a single reporter, and I found providing a single quote, ensuring that in my admin report there's an item around health and well-being, and then providing the paper quote when they're leaving. It routinely winds up in the paper, just because they're in a hurry. They want something, and if I don't give them something, then they'll make something up. So I can give them something and then have it directed that direction.
And Mike, what kind of response do you get? Do you have parents or community members talking to you when they see something like this in the newspaper?
Yeah, I think that I think that at this point our community has come to expect and understand that health and well-being is our number one goal. And so I think that what I would probably hear now is I would hear conversation if we weren't seeing it more often. But for sure, to begin with, I think our community. Well, I know our community supports a local paper idea that should be featuring student writing. The next one coming out actually will come out in January, because we've got a group of students that have done a series around their Media We projects and building on those and so that will tie in again our health and well-being. And yeah, I think it gets a tremendously positive results. I think that in ensuring that you're framing the conversation around what you're doing allows you then to look at that graph, for example, and say, you know, when parents start to understand that 2 of 10, 1 in 5 students wouldn't be considered at a thriving level. And so that engages them in asking what they ought to do. And I want to just say we've had a lot of conversation about the comparison and using this graph this way. I want to be very careful, and I'm not sure that I'll continue in this way, but reflectively, I was okay including that graph in. I would also have to be okay including that graph just the way it shows, is if the numbers were reversed, where Revelstoke was lower than what you would say all participating districts go. And so, and I frame that in a conversation to say, because that's back to, are you value judging the data? And so this was a little bit on the edge of what I would find kind of best practice going forward. I'm not sure I would do it this way again, where I use the comparison, because I don't know that it's healthy in terms of necessarily taking us on the right path, where I want to steer away from comparison purposes and more talk about our students as our students.
Well, Mike, you probably also have data over time because you've been participating for so many years that could be another comparison you could end up using to see how things have changed or haven't changed over the course of a few years in your district.
Yeah, and Kim had addressed that. Kim had previously addressed that really well in a webinar. I think maybe Kim, it was the start of last year or the year before, where that data over time, I mean, we've got trend data now to show we can follow our EDI. You know, we're about to follow EDI. Our grade 4 through 7, so we can track those students, but the question is how to present that, and I would be very hesitant to present it without being able to have focus groups digging into the data with the presentation, as opposed to just publishing it and saying, you know, our grade 7's 3 years ago in grade 4, here's where they kind of were generally as a group, and here's where they are now. Where I don't know that would be a helpful conversation. It would be an indicator. But the important part of being able to unpack the data some more and ask questions about the cohort and what you've done in the meantime as well. But yes, absolutely, having the trends over time it encourages careful handling of that data. But I think we have to I think we're controlling that conversation really quite carefully.
Too, to stay curious. I think that's the thing, you know, in the inquiry approach, Mike, that you mentioned earlier, is this idea is not judging, but trying to say, well, that's interesting. This group of kids, you know, really decreased in well-being this year. I wonder what happened that year. And this is where only the local community can make sense of it. We can't sit here at UBC and say, oh, that's because of this and this. It's where you bring it to the community and say, well, what was happening around that time? Is there anything else, you know? So, and that curiosity is what instigates really deep conversation.
Yeah, and the strategy that we've used is to pick an area of strength and an area of possible, and I hesitate to use the word weakness, but the area of vulnerability, and then explore them both at the same time. So that you have when the students are engaging in that, they're looking at so the community, like us, we're really strong in this area. So what's going on? Why are we so well connected? And then on the other side, wow, but you know, in levels of optimism, for example, why would we not be as optimistic maybe as we are in other, you know? So that the positive and the negative at the same time helps to frame the conversation to say that's a building. You build on your strengths and improve your weaknesses.
You choose two things, you know, instead of going through, because I mean, you know, the MDI is so comprehensive. It has, I kind of joke a bit that it has everything in the kitchen sink, because we cover so many areas. It's so rich with information about multiple dimensions of children's lives. However, you can't take it all on, you know, in the idea of sort of piecing out things that you really want to focus on and to strengthen the weakness. I love that the conversation around, not weakness, let's call it, you know, an area, like I guess vulnerability, or an area in which there are some challenges, or yeah. So I think thank you so much for really pointing out that importance.
So Mike, you mentioned that there are actually some student contributions to the newspaper, and I think that transitions well into the next topic, which is the different iterations that have happened in Revelstoke in getting students to actually take the data and have conversations with it and even present it to other audiences, which we really think is quite novel, and we'd love to hear a little bit more about it. So I'm wondering if you can both walk us through what those different iterations of activities have looked like, and then also sort of share with us what sparked this approach. Like, how did you even get the idea to do this?
Sure. Well, I think the idea has been, comes from educators' notion that you should be asking students what they're thinking and then reacting to it, taking some action and listening to them. So whether it was prior to MDI, it was an opportunity to use satisfaction surveys years ago, and students saying, it was kind of nice to be asked. It kind of suggested to us that somebody cares. And so I think that following through on that, just looking for as many, and I think that the term is entry points to conversation is important. And so the evolution, we kind of started, and I think it's 3 or 4 years ago when we first had elementary projects going on, where we just basically threw it open and said and we had a principal champion, it was Ariel McDowell, and she was interested in pursuing projects. She set up a little iPad project and offered students the opportunity to reflect, having gone through pieces of the data, offered students the opportunity to answer some questions around what it meant to them, and they got onto anxiety and worries, and the conversation that came out of it was in some cases conversation where a teacher or the principal actually directly interviewed the students, and another where the student would actually take the iPad and step away from the group, go privately and record themselves. And it was interesting what came out, and some follow-up on that as a result. That at the same time, we were sharing that data with high school students and a group of leadership students, and I brought those students back into elementary schools, and I actually asked them how would they share it, and then brought them back to elementary schools to sit down in small groups, and one high school student, a leader with 5 or 6 elementary students. And at that time, it was the data slides when you all were first putting those sharing slides out that were so helpful, and then what we were doing with that was celebrating the conversation by doing a little bit of recording, a little bit of story writing for either the newspaper or newsletters, and a little bit of video recording so we could start to archive some of it. And I would use clips of that to share back anytime I had an opportunity to present to staff, whether it was our opening celebration at the start of the year that Kim had been up to a number of times to start us off with. Just to remind everybody what was important about children's voices. The project that actually in that fabulous picture, Kim looks like we're playing a charades game there of some sort in that slide. Yeah, there was about 35 students in the library that day, and Kim did an overview, and I think that was a piece that's been important to us, is connecting with outside. The kids are hearing from their teacher and the principal and me and other local people a lot. It was really critical to us to have some outside champions in, and whether the kids understood the significance of having Kim there or not, it led an element of this is something big to the kids, and that was a great place to come back to this year, where I'm reminding students, remember last year we had the MDI team, and Michael and the rest of your team too, not just Kim, just because she's in the picture, but the rest of the team up, reminding them to carry on that conversation, and then looking to their direction. So what do you want to talk about? No, and I think, Michael, do you have the slide with all the sticky notes?
Yeah, it's up next.
Yeah, it is. Maybe we'll just click to that, because it's a natural, interesting things that happen when as we evolve through this year. And Kim, you mentioned early on getting to students before they write the MDI. We found, we get that feedback from teachers and from kids. They're like, why are we doing this? You get that question from kids before they get in, and that's a fairly taxing piece of work that they engage in grade 4 and grade 7 when they start that MDI. And so to have the context built in to get to them, I know I've just wrapped them up this week with visiting each classroom, asking broad questions about what it means to be healthy, what it means to health and wellness, connecting it to things that kids are doing in classes already. And in this particular activity, and there was 5 big charts in total, but the kids all generated their ideas on sticky notes around what it meant to be healthy and well. And the really interesting trend that came out of this was that we were able to identify all manner of elements around physical health and well-being that related to your sleep, healthy eating, activities, fitness levels, and some things around that school. But then on the charts related to connectedness and social emotional side, much fewer and levels of understanding around that, or ability to generate ideas, or even for students to connect it to say, oh, I didn't realize that was about my health and well-being. And so those created excellent conversations. We're now in the process of doing some video work around that to share with high school students. So that we're going to have the elementary students this year that have generated this, the start of this work, go into this high school and share what they're doing at grade 4 and grade 7. And just in terms of being able to celebrate that's important. I think that we chronicle that with video and pictures while we're doing it, so that the kids have an opportunity to share afterwards as well.
I'm just jumping up and down, Mike. I'm so excited. This is brilliant. I mean, I really, it just warms my heart, because really when we developed the MDI, went and talked to kids and said, we need you to be our teachers. We need to learn from you to how to make a better world. And that you're having the grade 4 and 7 students go and be the teachers for the high school students. I love it. I think, there's nothing more empowering than being able to share that information, but also for, there's nothing, I love how you set up the sticky note process. I mean, these are things we have to, I'm looking at Michael, putting all of this in the MDI, Discover MDI, right? So other people will benefit from your amazing creativity of your teachers. And I'm sure teachers all over will take this and run with it. But the idea of having the kids even brainstorm the ways health and well-being at these different dimensions, and then to see, well, actually they could think of it school and physical health and well-being, but they can't think it that much around connectedness. That just gives you such an opportunity to learn more about their belief, what they think, and to take it further. So I'm just blown away with how you have done all this amazing work. And as I said, the idea of going back to the children to have their voices heard, totally aligns with the UN Convention of the Rights of the Child, which we know is so critical. But, you wonder how these experiences will stick with them as they grow up, of having had this empowerment, and the idea of really being taken seriously. Because anyway, so I could go on and on. I won't, but I'm just so excited.
That's great.
Mike, every once in a while we get a couple of questions about whether kids really can understand the MDI, whether those concepts are too, especially for grade 4s, too advanced for them. And I guess I wondered if you could share a little bit about your experience with this, since you have examples of kids at MDI age, wrestling with these concepts, and how that's working for you guys.
Yeah, well, I think that you took a major leap forward when we started to get the charts and graphs and the sharing slides, in terms of just helping students have some concept or understanding of what it is. And I guess that for us, the key has been not to overwhelm with too much information. So even the slide deck, I would spend a half an hour in a grade 4 classroom with 5 or 6 of the slides from the sharing slide deck. And with lots of time for conversation and interaction. And that's what's been really important to us. I would say that anybody that felt that the grade 4s and 7s voice, that they weren't sure about what they were answering or how they were answering, I think just has to spend some time discussing with the students, sharing and saying, here's what it looked like last year. What do you think of that? And I think you do get a really broad range from low levels of understanding to very high levels of understanding within both the grade 4 and grade 7 classrooms. But that's only a small piece of the work that's being done, because that is not grade 4s and grade 7s, that is our students. And when you continue to frame the conversation around grade 4 through 12 or K through 12, then it's just a representative sample of the way students are feeling. A student in grade 11 or 12, and I have a video of her talking with the first, as they started into the data, they were flipping through the slides, and I just recorded them while they were chatting. And when she stopped on the slide related to anxiety, like the comment was, these are grade 4 kids. What could they possibly be worried about? Which led to a whole manner of diving into it deeper and understanding for them, saying actually, then when they started connected back to their own health and wellness at that age, they said, okay, they started to create an understanding as well. So I would say even at the grade 11, 12 level, I mean, they're obviously more advanced than the grade 4, 7 thinking, but still have lots and lots of room for further understanding.
Thanks, Mike. A lot of what you've talked about today sort of refers back to a word you coined, or at least introduced to us when we spoke to you about a week ago, which was de-eventifying the MDI.
Mm-hmm.
Stopping, thinking of it as just this one day when the survey takes place, and instead a whole, cyclical conversation about well-being. Just wondering if you want to share a little bit about your thoughts on that word, since you introduced it to us. We're going to try and use it a little bit.
Yeah. Okay. I got coined the word. Okay. Yeah. I think the key to going back now to at this time of year, and this has been a late start for our MDI because we wanted to have it really very separate from the FSA. I didn't want the FSA clouding the work around MDI, because as you pointed out, Kim, early on, there's much more to the MDI than there is to FSA. In terms of what value added for us for conversation. So in pulling them apart, we going to the students with these kind of projects and fun activities, and then leaving them with I'll be back because you will have the opportunity in the next week or so. And the way I presented it this year was before Christmas, you'll have the opportunity to do your own MDI. And then when the next time we look at this together, you'll be able to look at what the grade 4s in the district said and what the grade 7s in the district. So I believe, and this could just be my rose-colored glasses, but I do believe that there's some anticipation around the MDI now, whereas in the past it's been an effort to say it's really important that we do this grade 4s and grade 7s, and these are the reasons. Well, they know firsthand now because they've seen and been engaged in the conversation, so they know firsthand what the reasons are. And that's made a major difference to the way that it's being approached.
So in the few minutes that we have remaining, I just want to open up the floor for questions. So if anyone has questions for Mike or Kim, please go ahead and enter them in the chat box, and we will throw them out there and get them to wrestle with them. And Mike and Kim, if you feel like any topics haven't been covered that you wanted to touch on, there's time for that as well. So go ahead and enter questions that you have in the chat box. And we're also going to take a look at the ones that were submitted in advance. So one question that we received was whether students actually ever receive the results of the MDI. And I think probably it's helpful to clarify that they don't get a copy of their own results back from their test, but that there are opportunities to share the data with them directly.
Right. Maybe I could just say something about that idea of the individual. So the MDI is not an individual assessment tool in the sense it's not like clinical cutoffs or a score of 3.2 means you should be referred for some kind of services or something like that. So, I just want to make clear this MDI was not, it was a universal tool to actually, as everything Mike was saying, to inspire, instigate, catalyze universal approaches to promoting child well-being. So rather than the idea that we sort of identify using the very deficit approach that we often do in education, where we identify where kids aren't doing well, those kids who aren't doing well, who fall below, and then pull them out and try and fix them so they're, at the same level of average. The MDI really provides information that will lead to universal approaches to address the well-being of all students and that all students can benefit. I don't know if that helps that there. I don't know, Mike, do you have something? And then, of course, all that Mike said about sharing back. Yes, they should be shared back with the kids who spent all that hard work. I could make it even more pointed in the sense that I believe it's an ethical obligation to share the results in a developmentally appropriate way, not just photocopy the report and hand it to all of them, but in a way of presenting the data in ways that they can make sense of it. So choosing one or two things, having conversations, things like that.
Mike, we received a couple of questions from people who may in fact still be administering the MDI or just finished it, but about tips and tricks for actually, administering the survey. So, one question is just, do kids get tired throughout it? Like, is there a concern about response fade by the end of the survey? And just any other suggestions you have for making it easy for the principal or the teacher or you to administer the survey effectively?
Yeah, very quickly. I think the regular strategies for the good classroom teaching is about making sure there's appropriate wait time, rest time, engaging activities in the middle. I think the lead in is really important to say you have this opportunity to be engaged in this. So I think that helps with the length. I know that our principals are taking the time to do a break, and you've got a break built in to say this would be a good time to break. But creating an environment that doesn't feel like a sit down silent, and that's why I want it really disconnected from FSA or other kinds of testing. This is not a test. This is opportunity. So this is a conversation. This is, yes, it's your individual, it's your response, but let's ask questions and chat and talk and share while you're doing it to open it up. We've also been able to do it, and it'll be interesting to see how it works this year with a roving lab rather than do it online in what could be a kind of a sterile computer lab environment. We're using one of the mobile labs at one of the elementary schools at Begbiew Elementary to see, and that'll be interesting to see if that changes the response. But there's no question. I mean, I think grade 4s, you should be honest going in. You're going to think for a while. This is, you can't give a wrong answer, but this isn't easy, but it's important, and it's important because you're going to get a chance to see as a group elements that you've been talking, and it's really important. If you haven't talked about it before you go, then I think that maybe some of those elements that we were talking about, a little fatigue and fade, I think those are very real problems that you need to address in the weeks leading up to the MDI itself.
Thanks, Mike. It's also possible there's fatigue with the people who are administering the survey. We know it's been busy on the heels of the FSAs and sort of bleeding into the middle of December this year. So we definitely want to make sure that everyone in the trainer network gets the opportunity to take a break. But I also wondered if you or Kim wanted to share what you might suggest people do between the end of the survey now and the release of school data, which will be happening in mid-February. Conversations you think people should be having or preparing for, things they should be thinking about? What will you be doing, Mike, in this interim?
Well, that's a great question because the timing now brings us over Christmas. Leading away from those charts, though, a natural place to go with having the big charts up around with the 5 dimensions around the classroom activities, I would come back with those 5 charts and leave them up and challenge students to generate more things that they're thinking around their health and well-being for each of those, and just have it be a fluid add to between now and the time that they actually get their data. And then as a bit of a projection, we think these things, and so just some way of keeping it in front of them and just in the middle of their thinking, because as you pointed out early on, Kim, these dimensions are critical to their long-term success and happiness and development. And I think that's where it comes back to answering those questions around some of the fatigue. You say, well, doing good things isn't always easy, and this is not easy. So go ahead and work at it, but enjoy the work because there isn't another choice.
Well, thank you, Mike. I really, really appreciate you taking the time today to share all the work that you've done in your district. And I want to capitalize on the opportunity that you presented us to be able to share more of it in a blog post and examples online, and potentially even share some of the video clips that you were talking about, if that's possible, so people can get a real sense of what it's like actually doing this work in your district and in your schools. And I also want to thank everyone else who joined us today and anyone who is listening in the future, as this will be recorded and placed on our website. I hope that you had the opportunity to get a sense of what a school can actually do with the data and the types of conversations that they can have once they really think about the MDI, not just as a single event, but a year-round conversation on well-being. Kim or Mike, any closing thoughts?
Well, I just have to say it's really the hard work and creativity and dedication of people like Mike that really help put the MDI into action and to make a difference in children's lives. We could have the MDI people get their data and they put it in a file drawer. But really, Mike, thank you so much for being the prototype of how you can put this into action to really improve the lives of children. And I would argue that you although you see short-term benefits, I'm assured that the long-term benefits for the children in the community will be long-lasting. So thank you.
Great. And I want to thank Michael and you I'm looking forward to seeing that there's so many rich things
place around the province. And I know that as the scaling out continues, there's going to be so many opportunities to share, because I feel like we're kind of making this up as we go along here. And I'm really looking forward to sharing And because I know that in conversations over the last year, there have been all kinds of pockets of huge success. So I'm looking forward to seeing those, and I appreciate that you're bringing it all together on the MDI website.
Thanks, Mike. We are too. And if any of you out there do have things you want to share with us, please get in touch. There is an infinite amount of space on the website for us to share your story as well. All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a great